Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today I want to talk about this man here, Brevet Major General Alexander Shaler. Talk about his brigade, as part of the Army of the Potomac's 6th Corps. I'm going to take you to a summer's day in June of 1888 when Shaler's brigade, the veterans of Shaler's brigade, arrived Gettysburg around the Culp's Hill, gathered around Culp's Hill to dedicate monuments to the brigade and other regiments. You can imagine that time period in history. The veterans who are now in their 40s and 50s are remembering the war. They are erecting monuments throughout the Gettysburg National Battlefield Park and elsewhere around the country to remember their service. On this particular day, June 13th, 1888, about 1,200 veterans of the brigade, their friends, and the public gathered to have those formal ceremonies to bring in the new monuments. And the keynote address, the main speech of the day, was going to be given by General Shaler. Shaler is perhaps well known to some of you students of the Civil War who study the Union side in particular. Coming out of New York City, the son of a stonemason, was involved in the militia in New York City early on, the National Guard, if you will, and learned the art and science of war working with the local units in the city. When the war begins, he's major of the 7th New York State Militia, goes off to fight. He's a strict disciplinarian, a martinet by some standards. The men loved him for. He was a stickler for discipline. He was particularly interested in efficiency, put a lot of emphasis on that, and he drove the men hard, and they rewarded him and themselves with some stellar performances. One of those performances at the Second Battle of Fredericksburg, part of the Chancellorsville campaign, was playing a supporting role when the attack against Marie's Heights is in its toughest times. Shaler is on his horse, grabs a stars and stripes and rallies the men, goes up into the face of certain death. A number of his men did not come back that day. He did, went on to receive the Medal of Honor for his performance. So I tell you all this so you can remember General Shaler, from a major to a colonel to a brigadier, got his brigadier star after that Second Battle of Fredericksburg. And then at the end of the war, that brevet for major general. He was someone who was highly respected, highly regarded. So his speech on that day in June 1888 was much anticipated. In fact, one of my senior editors at Military Images said shortly, basically to the point, Shaler is a badass. So he was. I know they wouldn't use that language in 1888 in public, but we're in a different time. So I want to read a couple passages from his speech. It's a keynote. As a keynote address, it was particularly long, as was the style of the day. He delivered a magnificent speech. I'm going to read you some passages from the beginning and the end, which reveal his thoughts on how the war happened, the opposing forces, a little bit about the war itself, and the ending and the aftermath. So here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we meet today upon historic grounds. Some of us have met here before. 25 years ago, within a few days, two great armies confronted each other in this vicinity, one in defense of state rights, the other in defense of United States rights. One assaulted the Union, the other defended it. Let us go back to the autumn of 1861. The tocsin of war had sounded, the cry to arms had reverberated throughout the land. Fathers, husbands, brothers, and sons turned their backs upon their children, their wives, their parents, and all that was dearest to them on earth, and rushed impulsively to the defense of the Union. To show how spontaneous and how general this outburst of patriotism was, it may be stated that between July 27th, 1861, and October 27th, a period of 3 months, there were added to the army, then organizing, about 120,000 men, and that in December the following, there were in the vicinity of Washington and in the Shenandoah Valley over 200,000 men in battle array. Washington and its suburbs was one grand encampment. To arms, the people cry. The danger to our capital is nigh. Concludes the first part of Shaler's speech. He goes on to go in great detail to talk about the role of his regiments that he commanded in his brigade, the 6th Corps, the Army of the Potomac, throughout the major campaigns. Talks about the wilderness where he was wounded and taken prisoner. Goes into details about friends, comrades, strategies, generals, the whole story. The end of his speech rounds out sort of a nice bookend to the beginning. I'm going to read that to you. Quote, with sentiment akin to filial love, the masses with one accord uprise and bid defiance. The conflict rages, death, devastation, and destruction revel. Gloom and sorrow prevail. Portentous clouds of darkness envelop us. Evil spirits with hellish intent pursue unchallenged their damnable ways. The angels mourn, and all nature in darkness weeps. But see, a silver lining appears, peering with hopeful aspect. Peace, with olive branch extended, seeks audience. In the distance, seething masses of armed men struggle for mastery. With diminished force, rebellion aims her blows and finally sinks to rise no more. Victory perches on loyalty's crest. Homeward turns the Spartan band, heroes all. Halos of glory illumine the sky. Loved ones meet in joyous ecstasy. Liberty and peace have resumed their places. The dream is past, but stern reality bids us inquire, where is father, brother, and son? In yonder graves they lie, victims of disloyalty and martyrs for their country. Let us keep their memories green, and each recurring year cover them with immortelles and sweet-scented flowers. And let us not forget the living heroes. Let us remember that to them we are indebted for the blessings of peace and prosperity, which our reunited country now enjoys. Let us remember that the stars on our banner grew suddenly dim, and that it was the private soldier who restored to them their luster and palsied the hand which attempted their obliteration. While our children are taught to revere that emblem of unity and strength, let them also be taught the danger of assailing it. Teach them to honor its defenders, and if in time it should ever be threatened, let them emulate the patriotic example set by their fathers on this hallowed spot. Words of wisdom. Alexander Shaler speaking to the future, speaking to us with his words in Gettysburg on June 13th, 1888. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.